Recording in progress. Okay. All right. So it's only 100 seconds. So it's very condensed. And we're not going to go through it entirely now. I'm just going to like show you the very first portion, just to give you a brief introduction of React. Hopefully I can stop it in time.
JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Developed at Facebook and released in 2013, it's safe to say React has been the most influential UI library of recent memory. We use it to build components that represent logical, usable parts of the UI.
Have you seen this before? Does it
No. Yeah.
somehow seem familiar? No, okay. It looks a bit like HTML, but we'll get into that.
The beauty of React is that the simplicity of building a component has been brought down to its theoretical minimum. It's just a JavaScript function.
It's so easy, a caveman could do it.
The return value from this function is your HTML or UI, which is written in a special syntax called JSX, allowing.
We're also going to get into that. Maybe I should actually stop here. It's already a good introduction. It's a really good question. But
Is it a language?
yeah, so if we skip to the JSX section of today's notion, you can see I called it a templating language for React. So it's a bit like that. So you write, instead of HTML, you write JSX, right? And then you can add functionality to it.
One question. When we want to create a website, okay? The first thing that we do for the website is to create a React for it, work with React, or it's like HTML and CSS, and then have to work React.
I think we're going to see that when we do the setup.
Yeah,
There-
because selling group, I remember they told us, yeah, we want to do this website, but we're still doing the React for it.
Okay. I don't know what that means. Yeah.
Maybe some like stable CSS. So I think it's just like it's full everything.
That's actually correct. Like you're going to have a base of HTML that React is going to use to render the whole website, but then the website is also in HTML, right? Because React converts your JSX to HTML. But let's maybe start with the component model, because that's sort of the key feature of React that makes it attractive for teams and for people building websites as a business, I guess, building web applications. And he mentions that here, where he builds this page from these tags, right? And those are just components. So React allows you to make these components separately, make a title component, make an action component, and then reuse them over and over again on your website. So the idea is that that each UI, let's imagine this is a UI which has like a list of fruits, list of vegetables. We could have used that for the Energizer and the search, and you can split it into components. You can say this whole thing is called filterable product table. Then you have a search bar, you have a product table, a category row, a product row. So you can split it up into smaller components, and then you can, for example, say, like, one of you is working on this component, another one is working on this component, and then later you just put them together, right? Which is much easier than working on one index HTML that you can merge together later, right?
I have a question. Like, though I can understand that things are really easy when we are working on web, but still, like, if we are working, like, let's say in the old web where we have this huge HTML file and we are working on our separate branches, and still we can fetch and create a work in the pull request.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Git, it doesn't change anything about Git.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But this replaces the HTML file.
Yeah, so React creates the HTML for you.
So both together, HTML and JavaScript.
Yes, yeah, it's a bit weird, right?
So
Well,
we don't
yeah.
need HTML anymore. We have-
Not really. It's React is going to create the HTML for you.
So all our projects will look like one file, like,
In the browser, you mean?
No, in the main.
No, you can have different files, like all these components that we just talked about, they can be in different files, and they should be in different files. And then the second thing that I actually didn't mention about React, which is like the name implies, it reacts to your changes. So it's a JavaScript function, and you can give it some data, and it can render that data, and then it will update once you update the data.
I'm sorry, but you just said we need a base. Work with React. But you're telling me right now that React can be the base. So we don't need to have the base, we can have the React and then just create the base and the React.
And the base will look really small, just a couple of lines. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
You'll see when you create your first product, there's the base is created for you.
Yes,
Okay, so for working with React, we don't need HTML.
you do.
Yeah.
You still do it. You're not gonna use exactly HTML and CSS, but you're gonna use a flavor of it, let's say, right? It's gonna look very similar to HTML, CSS. You're gonna use HTML tags and CSS.
Oh.
That makes sense.
It's not HTML.
No, it's React. It's
Okay,
JSX.
so, I mean, it cannot fully replace it.
No, exactly. The browser doesn't understand your React JSX. React has to transform it into HTML.
You can HTML file, but it is almost empty, and you create text with React.
Yeah.
Inside HTML. This you do it the name, not like not hard like before.
Mhm.
And it also we can change React some values. You made one forms like groups or rectangles and just put inside values what it's the same form for every form for every items, but you just put another values.
You remember when we did like get element by ID, create element, and then we created just with no content, something with no content, like it's one season and it was without anything. And then inside JavaScript we say like get element by ID and emerge then or something. So I think this is like the same concept. When we had just root in HTML, and then with this React will feel it. Like we send everything there, but the thing is that we can change after, but if we write in HTML, we cannot like it will be.
Yeah. And it's actually really good that you're explaining to each other because you're way better at that than I am. I can't speak for you. But
Not import and export, just like Node.js. Like it's a lot of import and export, and we will have one file that will render to DOM,
Mhm.
just like app.js. And then we
Yes.
will export a lot of components into that file that will be called root component.
Yeah.
So
I
that,
mean, you're already really far. The next exercise is actually to just think about the component model a bit more, where we thought that you could take this website, which is the GitHub page of HackYourFuture Denmark, and split it into components, like not in code, but just on a piece of paper or maybe in a notepad, where you think about what these elements on the screen, how can they be split into smaller components, and then components within components, right? So maybe like work in your groups that you already have and take a couple of minutes to think about that, and then we'll compare results.
Can you show us an example of this?
An example, so I guess this is the example, right?
Yeah, the way of writing it.
Yeah, oh, hang on, I can't open this.
It is already.
There we go.
Yeah, but the way of writing it, I just want to know how to write it.
Yeah. I mean, you can do it like this. You can just take a like screenshot of a website and you can
like put boxes around what you think is a component. You could also do it like a file structure. So for example, for this, maybe the file structure would be the filterable product table, and under that is the search bar and the product table. And under the product table, you have the product rows and product category rows and so on. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but basically just what's easy for you. Yeah, I'd recommend just look at the website and try to figure out which parts of the website are being reused multiple places, right? Does that make sense?
Okay. I'm gonna set a timer. So we don't forget. Yeah.
Is there ways over here? Or to my left? Hey guys, don't move it. Yeah. All of it right here. So yeah, we take it from here into the down, all the way down, and we call it.
Jeg kan godt lige tage bare en eller anden separat noget sjovt, som jeg snakker om det der med altså sådan, components, der ikke er subcomponents eller noget, men som er sådan en del, altså shareable, shared components. Ja.
That's so you can you can move going instead of. Jeg tror, der var flere, ja, det synes jeg, der er jo kun 14, You don't have to finish, but let's look at the one possible solution. I think you have an idea what
Yeah.
how to do it.
You guys, you good? Right. Maybe we can do it all together. I'll just want to hear you. What did you find on this page that would make sense to make as a component?
The navbar.
First of all, the whole page is a component, right?
Yeah,
So we can call it.
that's the easy one. That's the root, right? So GitHub.com is the root.
Yeah.
But yeah, the nav bar, so all of this up here is definitely a component, right?
Yeah.
And within this component might be more components. For example, the search bar would possibly be a component, right? Yeah. And the same thing goes for like the header of this page with
The profile. component.
yeah. And within that might be more components. So this nav bar down here would be a component, and
Yeah.
surely this would be a component, right?
Yeah.
So you have a basic understanding of components and subcomponents, right? So within components are multiple components. But what we can also do, which I don't know if you thought about in your group, if you did, props to you. We have these people and these functions, right? That are within components, but these round profile pictures, they're also used up here, for example, right? Even though this is a totally separate component, so we can also have shared components, something that is shared throughout the application. So this profile picture might not be a subcomponent, but it could be a shared component that is used multiple places within the app. So there's so many ways for us to expand our applications with our components and use these components multiple places. So the file structure might not be, root, the root component, and then this page component, people component, profile picture, but this might very well be like a shared profile picture, right? So hopefully you all have a better understanding of components now. I hope so.
Yeah, and I think the next step is to get your local setup up and running so you can start writing React components, because I think you were very eager to do that before. You were already asking many questions about that. So I think we should do that. And I can show you how it's done, and we can go through it step by step, I think, because it should be fairly straightforward. You have a link here. Can you all see this link and open it?
The exercise 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have it open? Yeah, I don't know when everyone is ready. So you have it.
We are.
Okay. And then you open a terminal, probably in your Visual Studio Code, but I'm just going to open it here. We already did exercise 1, now it's exercise 2. It's not technically an exercise, just installing some software for you. So you have the website and you have the terminal.
In the VS Code, right?
It doesn't really matter, it just needs to be a terminal.
Yeah, we have.
And then you have, like, in your terminal, you go to the folder where you want to have your React project.
Yeah.
So you all did that. And then you use this command. npm create. I think you can do it Well, you can create a new repository or you can do it in an existing one, whatever you prefer.
Create,
Maybe in your homework repository, then you have it already.
But if you create the folder now and start a project in there, can we create a local repository after it will be accessible, right? Or
Mm, yeah, you can also create a repository later, but
yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question.
No, not get dash terminal.
So what you should see as the first question that it asks the like setup assistant asks you is the project name. And you can decide whatever you want to call it, and it's going to create a folder with that name.
It didn't ask me such thing. It just said, okay, to proceed. Why?
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah, because you haven't run it before. Yeah, you say why.
Needs to install.
So you
Okay,
have
now
to.
we can name it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go with this name. And then what we want to select is React.
Yeah.
Do you all see this? No. Okay, let's fix it where it's not visible.
Okay, so you are in the folder. No, you don't need to write. You have this couple of seconds on the website.
So you're creating the demo with this, right? That may be fine. You can also move it. Because you're in the documents folder. Yeah, okay, perfect. Then this is, you can give it a name. With a name. You can say React
I think
projects.
when you write B, you should do that.
This is also fine.
I also have this note in front of me. It's like I created it in my browser. So you guys just-
Yeah, no, you're a bit too far. We're not there yet. Hang on. Oh, but.
Yeah, and then.
Yeah, try it. Okay, you can't use spaces. So go for CD and then.
Yeah.
Type, no, you can, I can show you how to, no, you don't have to run the.
But just because I think.
Type CD. And then the capital R, and then you press tab. Yes. Let's go further. Yeah, so you can decide if you, it doesn't really matter. No, I wouldn't select those. I don't know what it means either. It might be service worker, but you don't really need to think about that.
Okay, so we.
But I would, the most simplest one is JavaScript. So let's go for that one.
Yes, we should JavaScript, and then it goes. Blah, 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 blah.
And it's done. And now you can go to the project folder.
Wait, instead of done, run, wait.
You see this done, now run.
Do, yeah, go on with.
Yeah, but you see.
And then you say npm install.
So all these three functions.
But not
if
on
you,
React.
by projects and.
Yeah.
stuff.
What's not moving?
An individual.
But I mean, you already know npm install and npm run dev, right? From your previous projects. Already used that? Maybe not. When you start your Node.js projects, you've also used npm maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the same thing.
Oh, wait, what happened? Okay, now what? Where did you?
Where you know?
That's so basically you just have to run these three commands.
So I changed it to the folder and I ran npm install. This installs the modules that you need. Like, it installs React and it installs some other stuff that you need. And then you run, whenever you want to develop your project, you run npm run dev. And then you have this local server here. And let me open the project in Visual Studio first.
Okay, now we came to something.
Private state is blue line. Basically just installs all the. So if you don't have any.
Okay, by plus React.
And now you just run npm run dev.
Okay, now you post.
So this should look like this now in your Visual Studio Code.
No, it's.
It does? Okay, so then you can press Command or Control and click on this link, and it's going to open your
And then you gotta click on React.
web server. Click on React. What do you mean? This one? No, it's just a web page. It's just a demo page that they made. So you can see the code for this page is actually here. So let's say instead of Vite plus React, I want to write Hack Your Future. And then I save the file. I go back and it actually changed that.
I love it.
So now you can develop in React and you can see the result in your browser.
But if I have this local page and.
It can't be found. Maybe you didn't.
I think that's used basically.
If you want to.
That's usually they will use HTTPS and.
If you want to click on it, you can actually hit commands.
Sorry.
Go back to music.
No, but I think also, did you close it before you? Before you went to take? Yeah, because right now it's not what I do.
Because something.
If you use.
Possible.
Made of something running or like.
You can try waiting.
Yeah, now just try to refresh your browser.
But why is that?
I think your terminal is refresh.
It takes a while to
Might be just go there,
It's not in the note.
Okay, so we go to the source.
I just went.
You sure it's the right path in your. Yeah. Because you might be in your database.
I think Docker has found this support. Yeah. That's a bit annoying. It's a different port. It looks like
We can find the source for.
it's too easy.
Let's go back to this one.
I write.
Oh, yeah, but it's using.
Yeah. Dus je bent open source.
Ja.
Als een asset. Als een ja, door alle.
You all good?
Yeah, there's no.
So this is our, you know.
Yeah, let's watch the rest of the video. And see what they have to say about JSX.
That the simplicity
Should we start from scratch?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really small. It really, we can watch it in half speed if you want to.
a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Developed at Facebook and released in 2013, it's safe to say React has been the most influential UI library of recent memory. We use it to build components that represent logical, reusable parts of the UI. The beauty of React is that the simplicity of building a component has been brought down to its theoretical minimum. It's just a JavaScript function.
It's so easy, a caveman could do it.
The return value from this function is your HTML or UI, which is written in a special syntax called JSX, allowing you to easily combine JavaScript with HTML markup. If you want to pass data into a component, you simply pass it a props argument.
Okay, that's for later. I think the most important part was about JSX and that it combines HTML and JavaScript. So this is also what it says here. We already talked about this, right? So the browser doesn't really understand JSX. Nobody has convinced the browser manufacturers yet that React should be replacing HTML. So we have to use JSX and then convert it to HTML. And that's what people usually call rendering. So when you hear somebody say, oh, I need to render this component, it means it needs to process all the data and then output HTML, right?
You run some debugger, which will make some tests and after throws error, or it's like from backend.
I mean, if you make a mistake, so let's say I'm gonna put just a p tag here without the closing one, and it will tell me that, well, I did something wrong in the JSX, it doesn't work. And then here when you run the development mode, you see that it actually shows you there is some issue in your app JSX and you have to fix it, right? Because JSX is not like HTML in that sense, that you have to be very correct. Like you can't make these kind of mistakes that you could maybe get away with in HTML. So here it also says has no corresponding closing tag. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's.
And we actually have a couple of exercises for you to and the first one is like a research task. But I'm wondering if we should have a short break for everyone, like bathroom and coffee, and then you can start on this exercise.
Yeah. And guys, I'm gonna leave a little bit, my summary is not so good, but Thomas is in charge of everything. Yeah. Lunch is coming, you guys know how to do it, make sure to clean that nicely, close the light. How about that? Let's do next one. Yeah.
Hey, this is my second.
Maybe we'll go.
For inline view, that's talking about.
Welcome back. I have a new exercise for you. So this time we want to encourage you to dive into JSX a bit more. Our exercise is your exercise is to research and explain to the others in your group what JSX is and how is it different from HTML. So just look a bit more into the documentation and find some good resources to figure out what is JSX. And there's also, the React docs. What is it? Beta.reacts. No, React.js. Something like this. Yeah. So these might be helpful, but there might be other resources too that you can use. Does that make sense? Okay. So we'll give it 10 minutes again, and then we'll talk about it.
Number 4.
3.
3, which one is that? Okay.
And it's in German. Yeah. Wow. Mhm.
So basically look up a bit JSX and some information. Okay, your confusions. For example, in this you can use class name instead of the class. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No problem.
Now you're making fun of me and you have
So
the
React
extension itself.
is the framework React.
It's the
Takes JSON and then it's translated
and it's.
into. So if you look at the,
Well,
if you have the
yeah.
slide,
Is it it or Microsoft?
the one which, and you try to
Yeah,
right
but
click,
you cannot use that extension point page.
and just clicking spread. Yeah, so these elements, this is basically the HTML that React makes
You
you.
pay for it.
So it takes the JSX file that you make and then it translates it into this HTML.
Yeah, you should pay for
Yeah, so if you have some script, it will also translate this. And CSS also.
Wait, so.
You just get my information.
It's not browser, it's React that does it.
Okay, but if we write for front end. Our address files. Or do we need to know?
If you make an image project and just make a JSX file, you will not be able to show it on your browser. So you need React. This is why React it's a framework, right? Which means that you put files into React and then takes these files and then translate it. So you can't just make a JSX file. You have to have React to use JSX file.
React means internal, like we told, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and your project is a React project, so you didn't just get an Insta project. You got your node packages, you got all these components that help you develop. Yeah.
And that we do for every, like, once we install in one project.
Yeah.
we'll install it, we send for it with another project.
Yeah, yeah.
Then, like, we install those table, and in this, it's like this, like, a device already as well. So, table, and that's it.
Very one, but it's it's what?
It's a trans file.
Yeah.
But it's something you shouldn't worry about, so that's the why I subscribe. That is the example with the tool that I use, like, it does all of this under the hood, like it might use Babel, it might use now, it just, it takes your files and translates them.
So what was the name?
But I prefer.
This one, VITE.
Why do we use
I think it's what we install when we.
I think it's what you call a bundle block. So sometimes you might have used Webpack, then what would you use?
Our benefits, right? Okay, that's what we-
Webpack is GS. Webpack is a bit old now since it's. It's like, because many people use it, but it's also very stable. But it takes a long time to. Configuration is very difficult.
So, well, we are considering that the JSX is kind of a JavaScript extension, and the wide line code looks like anything
You can actually look at this. So when you go to the package JSON,
When we can just like, right?
you can see it installed Vite,
One reason that you
and it
should
installed React and React DOM.
use JS
So these are the dependencies that you're using, and these are just types, so you don't have to worry about those.
Why should we use it?
It's just extra information basically. And then it also installs this Vite plugin React. So this is all that you need. And then within this plugin React, it might use Babel to do the job, but you don't have to configure Babel. You don't have to install Babel. It's all done by Vite.
So much easier to work. So for example, components, I mean, when I'm at work, I write one component. And I can
Yeah,
use all
it's
of
they are all dependencies because they are modules in your project.
something in this component, you don't have to do it most of the time, to do it once, and it changes.
So does it mean like when we write in
So
our,
I think it's really good
just
use
like,
it more, you
you
will
know,
understand why we
import,
like it, why we don't like it.
import the document,
Hmm?
then if you have Vite browser, import Vite,
Yeah,
usually what
No, because the way you use Vite is that you call it on the command line like this. So you are running npm run dev, right? And that just calls the Vite command. And then as soon as you have the module installed, it will look for a config file. And you can see there's a Vite config file here that it created when you ran this initial setup. And it's a very simple config file because it just says, take this plugin, it's called React, import it from this package,
Yeah, because the.
And
yes,
then
it's the combination.
do something, right? And then Vite will just figure out, okay, you have an index HTML here, and it links to it links to a main JSX. So I need to take this main JSX, I need to convert it to JavaScript, I need to make it all work in a browser, do all the magic, right? And then it will just do that.
Yeah.
And then
Here is some basic.
for our class, it's fine.
JavaScript.
We don't need the extra.
We always start with function.
And then if you want to, let's say you were done and you want to publish your website, there's also a way to build your website, and it's the build command. And then what it will do, it will create an HTML file, and it will create some JavaScript files and some CSS files, and then you can put this up on a server, and then your website can be on the server and can be viewed through a browser.
And HTML, CSS, or in with this we don't need to, with that, let's make them CSS.
Or we can look at what it produces. So if we run npm run build, so you can see it created 4 files.
Yeah,
It created this index HTML,
it created itself.
an SVG file, CSS file, and JS file.
Because.
And then we can look at what it did. And
How
so
like for the title.
it looks very similar to what we had, right? But it converted everything so that it's readable by the browser. So here you have your JS file, because it includes all the stuff that it needs for React. It's very compressed, that's why you can't read it.
Okay,
It's just,
so we should just have this to link it to our.
yeah, your JSX file is somewhere in there. You can see here, for example, it links to that file, but the rest of the file is just React itself and other dependencies. And it's just going to put them all in one JS file. So that in the end, the browser can open the website and it can just have all the libraries and everything that you need in a format that it can understand.
Does we still need to have index of HTML with the rules and stuff?
Yes, you will always need this index HTML.
Just that when I finish with run this comments, it's better to create.
Yeah, so you can't really put this on a server and have people view your website, but you can put this build on a server and have it. Or you can put it on GitHub and people can open it and see the website. Okay. The time is up actually. Anything interesting you found out about JSX?
We found an index HTML file. Yeah.
Okay,
Why there isn't, look, you have it as well,
Oh,
this one.
no, yeah.
Yeah, what do you mean?
can you explain why it exists? Because I
Yeah, so
Is it necessary to, so we can,
I think-
write the ID root and then link it to our script?
I think this is for
Yes.
the browser, right? So
Yes.
the title is the title in the browser and the icon is the icon in the browser and so on.
So if you run your dev server. Say I want to change the title. And you can see the title changed up here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it,
but can't you change it within basic?
no,
Okay.
because this is what we get in the browser, right? So the browser has no idea of these HTML element like you see here. Here's a div, here's an h1, here's another div. But in the HTML that the browser gets, there's no h1, there's no div. So this is all created by React after you loaded the page already. So when the browser requests the page, it only gets this HTML that you have in this index HTML. And also there are some things that get put in here for your dev server to work and for your, your scripts to load. And then everything will just be put in this like document get
How do
element
you
ID.
connect your style sheet, the JSX? Or you connect it to this HTML?
There are multiple ways to do it. So you could just go here and say style
Yeah, but that's the
H1.
HTML.
Yeah, but it's still gonna work, right?
Yeah, but is there a way that we can connect it to JSX?
Yes. Yes, you can also use the style attribute that React provides. So then you will have to write your styles in JavaScript, which is a bit annoying, but you can do that. So you can say font size 8.
Yeah, but what my question really is that you can see
And it
the
didn't work.
file having a style. Okay, we have the style file. It's CSS, yeah, style.css. We do have it there. How did it got connected to something?
So HTML, like, it will be styles, SRC, equal styles,
Okay,
these styles will be not changeable, like something that will not change, but something that will change will still be in JSX.
So the style that I put on the React component in JSX, you just put it in line on the page. So that's how React deals with your styles. But there are different ways to organize your styles. You can select which one works best for you.
maybe I think what he's asking is the import result folder, right? In the JSX folder.
Oh,
The
I'm
files,
opening the wrong one. Hang on.
like in app.jsx. you
Yes.
import.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
oh, yeah, import.
And that's the third way to do it. So you can also say in your JSX file, and this is a bit of magic, import a CSS file. And it will like, it's not React that does that, but it's your bundler, in this case, Vite, or it could be Webpack. Your bundler knows, oh, this is a CSS file. I can't just put the CSS in the JavaScript. Instead, it will put it somewhere else, probably here. Just put it in this style tag. Right, and it says, okay, it came from this file, but I'm just going to put it inline into the page. It's not loading an external file, it's just putting it in your page.
Isn't this the same as we linked it to HTML? Like, it will be the same output, right? Like,
Yeah.
SRC or the style is.
Any more interesting things you found out about JSX you want to share?
So basically JSX it's HTML in JavaScript body file.
When you create an element in DSX, always have to have the part. You can just
Yeah.
write it out.
That's true.
That's not a.
Yeah.
interesting one.
But you can make fragments. So you can make small like this.
Yes, and then
But you can also do it in GSDOM, no? Then why would you need GSDOM? If you can do it in there.
I'm not sure what you mean by JS.
Like,
DOM.
Maybe React
in
DOM?
GS, you can write something down and it will make changes in the HTML.
Yes, true. So let's have a look at, well, this is actually for after lunch. So maybe I will defer that question until then, because I mean, the advantage of using React is that it will recreate the website with new state when the state updates. And you would have to do this manually if you were going to manipulate the DOM, right?
I think it's kind of sticks with which element and stuff. Is
It does
really
that
faster, like,
For you, yeah.
you skip it, like, otherwise you need to write all these things by yourself, but it does it by
But you
itself.
can also do a JSON file,
Mhm.
JS, and then use it again, no?
Mm.
Instead of React.
Yeah, but a JSON file is not React, so it's a different approach, I guess. But maybe a good example is this one here, where you can see that we have this variable count, and it's just within the button. And you know, if I did this here, right? If I would say button. It wouldn't work, right? Because it's just HTML. But then if you do it in JSX, it's actually showing you the count. And then if you click, it will update the count. So if I wanted to update this, I would need to write document, query selector, button, inner text, and so forth. And you don't have to do that. It's all done by React. So that's kind of the React part of React, because it reacts to your changes, right?
But in your experience, is it more simple than just create elements from GS and HTML?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a political question, I guess, because I would say that for most projects, you probably don't need React. But if you're working in a bigger organization and you have to agree on something, right? So you have like maybe a team of 10 developers, or maybe you have a team of 100 developers, or maybe you have a team of 1,000 developers. You kind of have to figure out, like, we need some common tooling that we use, right? We're all going to use the same hammer, basically, so we get the same result. And React is really good at that, because many people know how to do React, and it's been there for quite a while. So that's why many people use it, and it's quite a good balance of popularity and convenience, right, for a developer. So, but for your own private project, you don't need to use React, I think.
Just use GS.
You could just use JavaScript, yes. Yeah, and even just HTML, right? Because I mean, you see that one annoying thing about this is that there is actually no content in my HTML. So that's an ongoing problem in the web industry, that this is called client-side rendering, because you send some HTML to the browser, the client, but it's empty. And then the magic only appears whenever the site has loaded and React has loaded and everything. So, but I think that's a bit too advanced for today. Okay. We go to this exercise.
Yeah.
So we have an exercise for you where you can actually code. I hope you're happy about that. It's from the curriculum, and it says create a new component called user item expanded and render some attributes. So this is the task. Does that even make sense? Do you need to explain it a bit more?
So we need to create a new file for this component, right?
You can also just delete what's inside your active JSX
Yeah,
and work from that.
you can. And actually, I think in the code inspiration, there is already an example that is very similar. So maybe you get inspired by the code inspiration.
So we have to modify the file that we already have. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's one way of doing it. You can modify the app JSX, this one.
Mhm.
Or you can create a new file. That's up to you.
in the same folder or
I can show you how to do it. Let's say I want to make a user list. Then you say export const user list this function. And then you return something, right? And then you can
Maybe.
no, I think I mean, yeah, I would just put it in on the like app page. We could also make a new, I'm not even sure how we make a new page because we don't have any routing set up.
Yeah.
So, so I think you would be best off to put it here. And then you can just write user list and it's already going to detect you created this file. And then you say, okay, I want this. And then it should render this here. See? Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay. So so have a look at the code inspiration and then extend it so that that you're going to show the full name, address, age, and you can just make them up, right? As you always do with exercises.
I think there's also lists. If they respond to the
Yeah.
list they use.
It's very similar, yes.
Where's that part, the coding expert?
It's further up on the same page. Let's scroll up. Yeah, so it is.
Can we will be writing the file we created?
Yeah. Remember that you always have to put the inputs before the export. And then you see you already have a function user list, right? So you can just export that. This is the item, and then further down you have to use the list. You can export this one. In front of it, you can write export. comes to the list and then we remove the, just switch it around. Which is the syntax issue. So you have to write export const user list. And then equals the function. You know, because you're assigning an array, but you also need the function. But now you want to remove it first. No, go back. So one issue with the code example is that it doesn't export anything, right? So you have, for you, it looks like this. Function, user lists, props, right? But how do you import this user list in app.jsx? Like you can't, because it's not exported. Then if you just say export function user list, actually, maybe that will work. I don't know. I thought it didn't work. See? No, this will actually work. So if you just put the export keyword in front of the function, it should work.
You'd also do it in the bottom of your file.
Yeah. Yeah, but then it's also going to be complicated because then you're going to be like export default, but I don't like default exports. So it's like, yeah, you have a bunch of choices, but you have to pick one that works. How to import it? Yes. Makes sense? And you don't actually need this one here, right? Because you already have your setup with these. You don't need this.
Yeah, I looked at here and I did the same thing.
Yeah, because. And so then clearing it up.
Where exactly?
Har du lyst til at vise løsningen senere?
Ja.
Bruger du dansk tastatur?
Ja.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is how I have it's true. We should create one cloud and white scopes like this visualize. And then should we create another cloud to write the JavaScript? Can you write this JavaScript in the other?
Yeah, you can use all in one file, right?
All in one file?
Yes, not the.
And how do we use it? Like this?
Yeah.
That's it, it's linked.
You haven't exported anything from your new file. This is.
Okay, so-
You need to export.
Yeah, but I want to first write it here.
Yeah.
Is it, do I need to write anything here?
You start with your file, and then when you export something, you can import it in PCB out of the version.
Okay. Yeah.
User.
So because I write within my file and then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Unless you have it.
Yeah, you have to return a white page. You have to return context. So like in your you have to return HTML. I don't have this.
The idea was that
If you go to the user list, then you return each user. I return in this. Yeah, that's not how we use. Okay, so.
So
try to-
the users just have ID, name and age. So you will add full name
follow this.
and languages, And then you, yeah, I don't know how to use this keyboard, but then you will show them here as well, not just name agent ID.
When you return something, try to make a new return. And then you can go to. No, just, yeah, you can also do this too, and you can just try to write the name. Something random. And when you implement it, you should see it right out. Try to go to your applicators. And then you try to use not put anything inside the users. And this should just be called user list. So not user list one, user list. Like your one. Okay, then it's fine. Try to go to the browser. Go back to your program. What's inside your name? What's inside the I just put this one. And yeah, you have to import user list one. That's all of it. But yeah, it has to have an import, so try to remove the user list one. What's number? And try to make it like an open tag. Yeah. And use try to write user list.
That you don't need the last one.
Yeah, and then inside this one. And then it should have imported in the top directly. If you go to the top of the, you see the imported. So let's save now.
Yeah, maybe that's the user ID.
Yeah, so that's P, right? First start, so inside your user list, this is where you have to now make some HTML that makes the user list item. Right? So what I do is I go to the GitHub to find active feature, maybe this. You have to try to up. So you can try to look at this example, right? So this is what you're trying to make now the user list. And the user list takes these props, and inside these props there's a list of users, like an array of users. And for each element in this array, you want to return a user item, which looks like this, right? So I think possibility is to use this number. So new users try to
I need to
just try to of course, we have to have only one term to function as and also use this user list. That's the function. It's only this. Not this, but this function. Yeah. But can I this now it should be functional. What this does is basically users, which is the every single user, and then the map function goes through them one at a time, and every time it gets a user, we have to implement this user item that render the single user, right? Yeah, you can do yeah, you see as No, you can inside the GitHub files. You can go down. This area of use. You can take this. And you can put it on top of your function. Yes, you have to say export function, not constant. Not, export function uses. Yeah, but a user item is not an array. The user item is a new function. Yeah. So this, you can say a function. Function. User item. And you can make that to get some trucks. I don't need to. Yeah. And then in here, you make a return. So what you can do is you can say return. In here, inside the using and then just make a H1 and then write cross. We have to use the curly brackets. No, not like that's all you get, and you can see what you did up here. You can the name that will give you the name of the user. With no space. And this you try to remove something. So it always is used like that. You already have to use it. Try to save it like that. Save it, then it's fine. No? Maybe we need basically what will happen is you have your user list, right? And the user list knows the array of users. And then it goes through them one by one. I know the problem is you can also try to say you know the name try to this first thing. Because right now you don't have anything called name. By saving it. So user dot name. Oh yeah. Users. Yeah. Well, I can repeat. So what happens now? You implement this user list inside your app. And what your user list does is it contains the array of users. Every single user, and it returns. That's your this user list user item every single user inside this array. So it actually renders this user item 3 times, once per user. Okay. And your user item takes this user and prints out the name right now.
Okay, so you're missing this one.
Yeah. but
It's
every time
missing
you
in
do
your
a
file.
return, It's rendering something.
You know what, I have written the same thing, but it tells me that
Yeah.
app is wrong. Here you in this on.
Yeah, you get an error. That's why this, because user item doesn't exist now.
It's not working like backhand and so don't return.
Maybe.
This is running.
So this one,
Yeah.
wrong, and that one user. Just like, did it work?
So you can also print the props as a page. Yeah, so when you use like user item. No, you have to use it in a different priority. Yeah, if you put this inside the current, you have to no, you have to put them within parentheses. Right. This, right?
Yeah.
Like this one.
Which. But also you call those undefined. Maybe some, this time we put a terminal in our yes code instead of big bash.
And then you have to put something around it, so you have to put this
So the irony
in brackets, right? And then use the voice to make
It's really one.
And you can make another one.
And then try, and let's see, yeah, this one.
Page.
And then you.
Sorry? It's just you cannot you can't just make two single H2s like this. It has to be wrapped inside something, right? So you could also
You got the same problem with. Now, your coin base.
everything has to be wrapped inside something. It needs to be returned properly. Because that's why it's a component, because it's everything is wrapped inside the box.
But I don't know them, because they're not certified, you can ask almost. Yeah, perfect. Now you're going now you can go back to your Visual Studio project. And I will just copy the user item extended over to the other project. You see you have a new one. And these are fine. So copy the user item extended file.
What happens is that as we talk about before we go through every single user, we make a user item.
We do the same.
And this user item, you can use this part to print out the name.
No, I won't do that. Because the only thing we need is one.
Put it in the tag.
So, yeah, but you can make the document. I wish we like.
Props the last name achieve this, right? Whatever we give, we use the IC, you can
You just need this.
use the Stephen that day.
It's not. But then if it's- go down the edges, I recommend this one, this one. And then if you go to user list, export your cursor after the interval.
Now we are not on user list, and it's needed for us. Yes. There's no other problem with you.
So here you can see. Hey, this is-
But there is some other logic.
Users, and you do the create control the space, open specifically, and then we'll suggest you.
I was just watching.
And now actually everything that you do is possible. Yeah. And then you say it's now. I was just, I want to see if it works. And then save the file. So nice. That's what else for you.
If I write like this, you know, you turn
Yeah. First, this last. So when you, where do they go now?
Maybe it's because,
You see the file.
name, it's because
This one.
you don't get a full name, you get a name, right? When it says name equals.
Okay, so. You know, this just.
You get these, the name,
So where's your other default export? At JS? No, in the same time. Yeah, you have a node, so you can't have two default exports.
Okay, so I should delete one of them.
Yeah.
Delete this one, can you go here?
Yeah, use it whatever you want. I mean, I don't know why you add any. In this.
I added that after you told her that you used it like this, right?
Oh, but that was in the
Name,
JSON.
okay. And then you can keep expanding, so you can also, you have the age, height, address. You can keep expanding in here.
But I need
Yeah, so if you want to put the age, you have to
Like.
also the address, right?
Yeah.
And you have to put it in.
Go back to this one.
Address.
I opened another file and I.
Address. So that you call add is your own use
Item.
that you can see. Yes. Okay, cool. Well, then shouldn't we, okay, it's fine, but then you write export
Cross, dot, address.
then you can export.
Now you have
things.
also you also
Give
execute
it
the
a-
address item, right?
If you just can't have multiple default.
And
You can just default the export is. it.
And how to know what it's like this file.
All that will export.
yeah, it's right now, it's just this index. For everything in here. If you change anything in the H1, you say font
It's like
size,
dual exports.
I think I use H2, right?
But
If I make them-
And then you just add.
And now I want the font size to be
I did add this one.
the size.
Okay, but what about your app?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
So should I just import it here, right?
Yes.
But isn't that enough? I just heard.
Because, well, I would also recommend you to not write these sources, so we have visual.
When we get the top file.
Try to read this line and the line. below. And then
Usually,
in using.
when I make
Which component do you want to use?
JSON 500, if I want to make some special CSS for this one, so then I'll make explain this and use a list for the CSS. So for example, here, right now my H2 is like this, right? I want it to look different when it's things like the use of this.
Yeah, and then you might.
I'll change it here. I want it to be larger than the rest of the project. And
Yes, and then. And it already suggested this one.
Yeah. Okay. One, two, and for the user icon is fine. The same. So this. So why don't you use it? Yes.
and now I can change all the CSS for
So you need to make that.
for users, not for the rest of the but only for users.
You have to have a different.
So every time you have
And this
a
is.
new
Yes.
function, a new component, you can make special CSS only for this component, not for the rest of the content. Just this.
Oh, I'm spending on new sort of new spot here. I don't know.
And if you can't find anything here, then it will look inside the CSS.
It should. Deep down, they've already deep ones. And we're talking about that.
Now,
I, to you, this one, but there is. So I can use that. Deep down in some folders, but not also you can see you have two times reactive. You have to remove.
how it's supposed to be structured is it should be the main.
Yeah, so when you have a React project,
That makes sense.
you can make
It looks like I have two users that I can make sense.
so React one is
Importing, yeah.
and when you want to make a new, you have to make a new project. And so maybe you can call it React 1 week 1 your project. And then next week you can make a new project for React 1 week 2, right? Yeah. And when did you want to make this week 1?
I told it. Correct on the one. And I decided the name is like manually and create and change it.
Just. Try to see what the.
I understand what is, because we are returning.
Or user item extended from user. Import.
Nie, tak ty na sezonie to posła Polski niczym
I go back to. No.
Just create a new project.
You try and write it in.
Yeah, you can also do that. So basically, every time you want to make a new project, just give the line, make a new project. You know what I mean? So, but, like next week, you want to make a new project. Yeah. just go through that, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you just make a new name for each project.
Yeah.
I hope it.
You should this.
Maybe just remove this export here, because you don't need it. I do think that.
Ты создаешь новую перемену, и подходишь на дом
The first year, you say, but now, yeah.
It should also unload.
Now,
Can you scroll down in the bottom? That's in- And if you look here. Okay, that's- Is it error? So where is the user identity? Oh, okay. Yeah, but, oh, this one, yeah, you do. That's what you do. Same name, right? We already exported. Yeah.
Why do you show the same address?
It's much easier with that.
Yes.
There is lunch, by the way, should we, yes, right, and eat? Oh, yeah, there's a grand. I love it. Yeah, right.
yeah, instead of like. Oh, no, no.
Yeah, you get.
I did the.
The regions is being works.
This one, right? Well, why?
It should be one. No. You. If you go back to your address, I'm very sorry, before there's none.
Yeah.
And you can actually do it on one line, just like.
No, I understand.
I look like it was 7 days. Wait, but it worked for the gym?
Yes.
So.
But no, and we do.
Broke it again.
Come on. I mean, I just want to learn this thing. Yes, I am. Here.
Let me see the. Of the graduation. Probably, I don't know. The reason. This is John. This is the one. I copy it on. And.
No way. Go back to your.
I guess in the rate. Or we can. For build the. Oh, and you have any windows to the brand thing.
This is what we
You know when there's no dots.
Users.
There's no dot next to the X. And it's already saved.
Try control.
We'll see, I'm sorry. It's in pin one there, but you can also just press the alt key.
Okay, you can just
Sure. I already said it 2 times. Over there on the table as usual.
Thanks for today. Yeah, I also learned some very quick. Thank you. See you.
Yeah, but it looks awful. Yeah, look at. Look at that, that's how it should look actually. More readable.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did. Come on, guys. Yes, I know, I did.
I think we'll post the recording.
I cannot reach my comment.
All right. Well, I try to just implement a very simple version of this myself, right? So I'm sure you all got something similar to me, but basically I have my app.jsx with all my users. And to render these users, I created this user list that takes these users as a prop, right? So within my props, I have access to the users. And with this function, I go through each of the users. And for each of the user, I make a user item. And within this user item, I print out the name of the user, the age of the user, and so on and so forth, right? And same thing goes for languages. For each language, I print out the name of the language. So in terms of the exports, like we said earlier, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it down here, where you export this user item as default export from this file. You could also and just write export function user item. When you export something, it means that the rest of your app has access to it, right? Which is why when I want to use this component I made called user language, I import it, and I import it from this folder, user language, and I look for the file with this name, which is also user language, right? So I have access to this component now, and I can use it within my within this component. So that answers your exports and imports, and it's really ugly, but but it works, right? So hopefully you all came to something similar to this.
Explain this line. Props dot users, like what do I do? Props first, we just named it like this, or like we put users in there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this is my app.js, and I implement this user list that I created up here, right? And inside the user list, in my function, I take something called props as a variable, no, not as a variable, but as a, yes, yeah, prop, yeah, exactly. The props are all the things that are written inside of the component, right? So if I also wrote something like age is 97, I would also have access to this age inside my user list. So when I want to access these props, let's say I add my name. I add this extra prop called my name to my user list, and inside my user list within props, I also now have access to something called, what am I reading right now? Something called my name, right? It should be all over my, if it wasn't fold errors, it should be all over my console. But not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just need to save all of them. That got worse. But yeah, let's not try to make my.
I think it's because if you go to user language or user item, one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
You change it.
Did I save it? I don't know. But let's not. Yeah, it worked. But
Does the console show the item? Yes.
yes. So props is like everything that you pass to a component. Everything that you pass to a component is inside these props. So that's why I don't just write users.map. I have to write props.users.map because I have to go to my props. And then within the props, I have to find this thing called user or my name or whatever it is. So I think maybe you saw the example on the GitHub where instead of just passing a user, they pass like name is user that first name and so on and so forth. So then within your user item, you would have to access them like props.full name, props.age. So props is the folder where all the things you want to pass to a component is within, and then you can access them
So
like this.
declare props, we write, so when you declare props, you have this user inside props, right?
Yeah. And
Like an array, right?
yeah, but now when I make the user item, I use this function called map, And what map does is that it goes through every single item within my array. So when I pass it like this, it's a single user. But it's still an object. So props, the cool thing about props is that it can be anything. It can be an object, it can be just a basic string. It could be a function that calls back to your component. It can be everything. So whatever you want to put in props, you can access it through your child component. But I just passed the user.
Sorry, can you repeat
Hmm?
that?
Yeah, actually, it's a good transition because we have to talk about state and props now. So let's just move on with the class, and then we'll get through all the smart things that props can do and all the smart things that state can do.
Props is like attributes in HTML, but in HTML, they are like all declared and props that we can create ourselves, correct?
Correct. You see that this looks very much like an HTML attribute, like the language. It looks like it could be an attribute on an HTML tag, and that's exactly what this is mimicking. So the props are custom attributes on your HTML tags that are really just components, right?
Yeah, so my component is user language. My props is everything after. So language is a prop. Anything else I write in here will be a prop.
That's how we declare props. We don't like do it complicated with just like create user language by writing, right? And it's like that's how you created it, and then what you write after will be created as prop.
Yeah, so basically this would be a component without any props. This is just user language. And all the props is everything I put in afterwards, right?
So not in the file where it's user language, but
No, within user language, you just have in your function you declare your props, and then you can access them afterwards.
Yeah, basically you don't put any restrictions on what people can put in the props here. But there are ways, maybe you saw this online, I saw this on some of your screens. There are ways to restrict the props that you can pass to make it a bit easier, because you know when you make the component, you call the prop language, and I think maybe it's called lang, and then I use the component and I write lang, and I'm like, why isn't it working? Right? So,
But this is I guess this is all a really good transition to start talking about props and state, right? Let's
one prop
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
In another file, you like just connect other like the two words.
yeah. If let's say that I want to also write down when they learned this language, I can also put this in the props, and it's expandable. So it can just be like a single thing like the language, but it can also be like a massive amount of data like the language, the name, an object, the function.
But not in this file, like you said, we can add them in the next file where you just have written this. Yeah, after using language also. They should not be in the first file. They can be added in this file, right?
Yeah, this is where you add your props. So basically, props is a way, if I'm a component, it's a way for me to communicate with my child components, right? So the reason that is so smart is if I didn't use my props, then I wouldn't be able to what do you call it? Like I wouldn't be able to change this component depending on the language.
it wouldn't be dynamic, basically.
No, it wouldn't be dynamic. Yeah.
You would have to hard code the language and then make a new file for each language.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
I hope this, but yeah.
Why do you separate this function?
So you mean these two functions? Yeah, it's basically, you can do it multiple ways, but usually it's very nice to be able to represent it like this, right? So let's say we have a very, very large application. And within this application, we have a list of our users. And if I want to change something inside the part of my page where I show which languages they speak. It's very nice to be able to say, okay, it must be inside the user list and inside the user item, and oh, there's a user language, and then I only have to read a very, very small amount of code for me to understand what's happening and for me to change something. So so the reason I put it inside the folders is, first of all, I know that user language, this is a component, right? And this component is under the component called user item. So all my file structure mimics the way I use my components on my page. I hope this helps. It's a bit nerdy, but you could also just write it in here somewhere. But this is a way of doing it.
But one advantage is that now you can actually reuse the language component for something else, right? Maybe you have a project language, then you can use the same component that you use for user language, show the project language.
Okay, another question. What do you consider, what do you use to consider like language as a component? Like where you want to
The reason I like to make it into a component is we have the user item here, right? And I know that for every user, they only have one name and they only have one age. But languages, like you see in my in the users out here, they can have multiple. So I don't have to, if one of them only speaks one country, or some of them speaks 3 countries, I can make one component per language, right? So I can react to how many languages they speak. I don't have to consider if they speak one or multiple languages. I can just make a component per language. But for the name and the address, I don't need to make a component because there will always be one first full name, and there will always be one address, right?
If you want to use this, like you said, languages somewhere in the other part of our project, where would be our component 3? Like, should we copy this file under some other?
No, you don't need to. For example, let's say I just want to do something here, right? I want to say this page is written in like this, right? So I imported from this file structure. I know user language is inside user list, user item, user language, and here's my component. And I can use it inside this app.jsx. Hopefully. But yeah, let's not use
some things that you changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but hopefully it makes sense that as when I have a file that implements this component, I can use it from everywhere. And it just depends on my import, right? So here when I use user languages, I say, okay, I'm in the folder called source src, and from here I have to look inside user list, inside user item, and inside user language, and this is where I'll find my component.
Just write the correct path.
Usually, your Visual Studio Code will do it for you. Yeah.
You don't know how this works. If you write user language, for example, it will suggest you where this is exported, and then you can hit enter and it will automatically import it from the right path. So you don't have to sit up an hour and be like imports. No.
Yeah.
Right? Makes your life much easier to figure out this.
Yeah. So does it make sense?
Also remember that it's just a convention, so you can change it. If you want all your components in one folder, you could do that.
Yeah. This is just the way I do it, but
If
you can
want
do it.
them all in one file, you can do that too.
Yeah.
Like 1 million lines, all the components. in one file.
And here you go. So I wrote this page is written in, and then I used the user language. And even though it's far away from from the app.jsx, it will still use. So this component right here, this is user language, just as well as this is, right? So basically, the reason that we use components as programmers, and the reason that we like using them, is because we want to write as little code as possible. And when we write some code, we want to be able to reuse it as much as possible, so that when we want to change something, we only have to go to one folder, to one file, and change it in there. So the goal as a React developer is to never have two files that look the same, right?
One more question.
Yeah. Now I have, so app.jsx is a component, and user list is a component, user item is a component, and user language is a component. Yeah. So let's talk about props and state. I mean, we've already talked a lot about props within this project, right? I don't know, what do we want to say about props? But yeah, like I said, props can contain everything. So it can be something very simple, like a language. This is just a little piece of text. It can also be an object, like here. I pass the whole user object to props, and I access them in here, props.users, and I have access to everything within the user, the language, the age, so on and so forth. You can also make a function into a prop. So if I make a function here, I can also pass this. As a prop, and from inside my user list, I can call this function back on my on this component, right? I don't know if this would work. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so from inside my user list, I can actually call a function inside my app.jsx. So this can also be a prop. Everything you need to be able to use to make your component work, you can use it as a prop, right?
You know, in the beginning, we were talking about how is it different from writing query selector in a HTML, right? And the thing is that whenever a prop changes in any of the components, React will know that, and it will re-render your page. So you never have to worry about, oh, I forgot to like tell it to update this thing. It's gonna do it automatically when you change it. And the same goes for your state, because props, they are passed into your components, and they sort of allow you to configure your components, but within your components, you can have some state. So this example has a counter where you can click a button and it counts like 1, 2, 3, maybe you saw it when you first started the app. And that is using state. So within the component, you have a method to collect some state. And then you might say, but why don't I just write let count equals 1, then I say count plus 1. Because then React doesn't know that it has to update. So when you use React state, React knows that it has to update the page whenever you change the state. So that's the sort of the trade-off that you have to do, right? You have to write a bit more code than just saying let's whatever. But then for writing this more code, React will take care of all the updating on the page. I think you removed the state update.
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to make a really bad example and
We can show it.
yeah, no, but I think it's instead it's better to use state. Yeah.
So then how do you like track where the error is? For sometimes it doesn't say, but on a web page it doesn't show.
Yeah, so you have two places. You can look at this console there in Visual Studio Code, and it will show you the issues that you have like in your build. Then once the app builds fine, you can see the errors in the web browser console.
Yeah.
So usually if you don't see anything on the page, you need to open the console in the browser. You know how to do that, right? You say inspect, and then you have the console. So you have to check these two places.
Yeah. So I have a lot of errors here, right?
Yeah,
But now it was fine.
and they just pile up because this has auto refresh. So when you change a file, it won't delete whatever is in the console. So after a while, we just have this massive list of this.
But yeah, hopefully you know a bit more about props in terms of state. Let's see.
So state is also declared by the props or.
No, state is something different. State is something that is unique to your component. But basically state is like a variable. But when a state changes, your app will react to it and it'll update, right? So if I just write const my name, this right, and I use it somewhere, I change it somewhere from within my app, it'll not update my web page. But when I use a state, it will update. So
You can define these names by yourself. So this is good. You're going to see this a lot when working with React. We're using these hooks. That's what they're called.
yeah. What do we do? Yeah. I don't know.
How do
You can do that.
assignments in JavaScript?
It's yeah. Can you say it again? I just need to understand.
I saw you declare a variable and then assign.
So when you want to use state, you have to use this use state hook, right? Which is not imported for some reason. Where's it imported from? React, right? Oh yeah. So to use a state, you have to use this hook. We call this a hook. This use state. And what makes it a bit different than a normal variable is that first of all, you need to what do you call it? Declare the state within this use state, and it's a constant. So you can't just change it down here. You can't just write name equals him like this, right? So when you want to change it, you have to use this function that you also declare when you declare your state. So I want to change the name state. I write set name pop like this. This is how I change the state.
In this clause, what is that?
That should be the default state, right? Yeah. So when you start out when your component loads, your name will start out as this clause. So let's try to make a button. Let's set. And let's see how many errors I have now. Hopefully a lot. Oh. I need to stop changing so much.
Yeah, in your JSX, please type the set state.
I think so. Too many re-renders. Oh yeah. No, I don't do I.
But I think you need to wrap it in function. Okay.
Oh yeah.
We talked about this in JavaScript 3, do you remember? It's a long time ago. What's the difference between passing a function and the result of? If you pass the result of a function, you can't call the result. Then it's the result.
All right, there we go. So this is my state, right? This is the state I called name. If this was just a variable and I click this button and I change the variable within the function here, nothing would happen. But because this is a state, when I click it, it'll change your page, right? That's what makes a state usable. That's why we use states, so that we have something, so that we can re-render our page whenever something changes within our states. So that's the kind of like a prop, but only for your component. You don't use it. You can use it in other components, but you can also just use it from within your this component, right? So just like props, when you use a state and you change the state, it'll change your component. Yeah.
I'm sorry, one question really quick. Where's the difference between React and React Native?
Yeah, so React is for web apps and React Native is for making mobile applications. So like if you want to make an app for the App Store or Google Play Store, you can use React Native. React Native does look a bit different. So you don't use HTML in React Native, you use React Native's own kind of templating language, right? And you don't use CSS, you use their own kind of style sheet. But once you learn React, it's quite easy to then go on and learn React Native. So that's a little bonus for learning React, is that you can also start making applications for your phones, if you would like to do so.
Yeah.
So like, whenever you, the name, is it a variable?
Yeah, it's a state variable, right? Yeah.
Whenever you use the name, is variable. Means it will change. It will change whatever it is.
I mean, you can just use it, right? So, so I just use it here in this H2. This is just my state as it is now. And then you can choose to change it somewhere else, like for example, inside this button. So that's the difference between, you see when I declare my state, I write both the name and I write this function called setName. So when I want to just use my state variable, I just write name. So for example, this guy, he uses the state name as his full name. And when I want to change it, then I use this setName, which is a function that I use here. So I say name that should now be this James.
If your first page will not go to the default menu, will stay.
Yeah, I mean, if I refresh it, then it should go back to clause. But then from here, every time I choose to change my state, it'll change my view.
I mean, think about what you would need to do in plain JavaScript. You would, instead of set name, you would write documents that query selector, then the tag where the name is, and then you would say that inner text equals. Yeah, and this is the React way of doing it. You can build much more powerful web apps with that mechanism because you can store anything in state. It can be an object, it can be an array, it can be your whole page, it can be components, it can be JSON. So you can build very interactive websites where something big happens whenever you click something, or small happens.
And something cool, like we talked about before, that you can pass a function within within props, is that you can also pass this setName function within props. So you don't have to set your name inside this component. You can also do it in a child component, right? And you can also pass your state to another component. So if userlist has to show this name, I can also pass name to this component.
For example, as in Facebook, when we have this, I don't know, red number without clicking anything, is that they just put it like a function? So we don't click anything, but we have like a new notification, or it's just, is it also state? Like, because it can change, right? You know, when we use Facebook, we have notifications.
It's probably a state, but it's fed by an API. If they make a call to Facebook's REST API and they ask it, does the user have red notifications?
So,
and then when the answer is yes, they will set the state to show the that.
Yeah, if you were doing this, you would probably use Node.js, right? And then under that, you would use MySQL, right? Yeah. So inside MySQL, there would be something like my users there, my Facebook users there, and it'd say I have this amount of notification. And then inside Node.js, you would find this user and you send it to React, and React will say, okay, there's a new notification here. So then it will show this red badge. Yeah. So React doesn't really, in most use cases, React doesn't work on its own. It needs to be connected to something like Node.js, which needs to be connected to something like a database, right? So this is just for the UI, of your web page.
and so they put this, I don't know, link to the API update. Inside use state, we have name, like now we have like name, cloud, but if they want us to like with a notification thing, we just need to put a link for API or database.
Actually, yes, because there is a hook for that. It's called use query. It's an external package, React query, and you can put the URL for your REST API in the use query, and then it will populate the
Yeah.
state from your REST API.
There's a lot of ways to do this, right? So
But with this use state anyway, right?
You probably wouldn't want to use it because remember that use state is mostly for like user state. So when the user does something on the page, then you want to change it. Yeah. But if you have external systems that you synchronize with, there are much better ways to do it because you're going to run into problems with use state. You can use it, and many people do. So you will find examples on the internet, and they work sometimes.
But you still can use it like, let's say, that, like this I have read, if we have on the left and on the right, something stable, and like Facebook feed, it just changes like we
Yeah.
scroll, but on the left and the right, something stable, so the feed will be also use state, right?
there's a lot of ways to build your web page with the React, but that's a good thing to have to have opportunities, right? So
Since we have 10 minutes, can we go to the homework?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Good.
Do you? I don't know.
Yeah,
if,
I'm not sure if I understand it.
So
We can try together. Should be, yeah. This one.
yeah, all right.
Yeah, actually, so don't do this. Right? I know there's a typo, but also ignore this because use the process that we've done, right? Don't use create reactor, but use Vite setup.
Okay.
Just create a new project with React. If you really want, you can use create reactor. Up to you.
You know, actually, I have done a to-do list, but with HTML, CSS, and like JavaScript.
Yeah, so now you can convert it to React and see if it's easier or worse.
So it's the same thing we did, right? Like,
So it's render a basic static to-do list. So this is not changing. Instead of users, as you say, it's basically the same. You render to-dos, right? As a description, deadline. You should also draw a mock-up to have the components, you know. Should be fairly simple to do, actually, to be honest.
With colors, just mean that we can customize it, right?
Where does it say that?
The component, identify the component with color.
Oh, that's just for the mock-up. So when you draw it on your screenshot or whatever, well, you don't have a screenshot. You can take a screenshot of this and you can wrap it, right? So to be honest, even if you're behind with your homework, I would recommend you to just do this homework whenever you get home. Because it's going to be so much easier now that you are in the mindset. And then you already have it, right?
I'm really behind from Node.js. How many weeks?
The last one.
I'm more behind than.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, as I said, you don't have to use it. You can use the tool that we have used, or you can use Create Reactor. Create Reactor is older and it's a bit slower. Yeah. Well, it's on the AccuFuture repository. It's where your homework usually is, and it's also on the Notion page in the top. Have you?
It's actually.
So we can more common.
Well, you can't write, sorry, there are two questions at the same time. I will answer you first. You can't use JSX and JS files, basically. It doesn't work. So you have to name the file JSX to use JSX. Because otherwise the bundler, like Webpack or Vite, they don't know that you want to write JSX, so they don't understand. What was your question?
And instead of this comment, we use this npm create latest.
Yeah.
We did.
Exactly, yes. And I don't know what this is, but yeah, feel free to go through this article and read.
I'm sure there's like React is used by so many developers. So if you go to YouTube and you just write something like the React simple project or anything like this, there will be a lot of tutorials that help you go
For
through
UI,
the first
which is great.
project, right? That
Actually,
will be
we
a huge help.
we didn't see the rest of the video. Do you want to see it?
A special syntax called JSX, allowing you to easily combine JavaScript with HTML markup. If you want to pass data into a component, you simply pass it a props argument, which you can then reference inside the function body or in the UI using braces. If the value changes, React will react to update the UI. If we want to give our component its own internal state, we can use the state hook. The hook is just a function that returns a value as well as a function to change the value. In this case, count is our reactive state and set count will change the state. When used in the template, the count will always show the most recent value. Then we can bind set count to a button click event so the user can change the state. React provides a variety of other built-in hooks to handle common use cases, but the main reason you might want to use React is not the library itself, but the massive ecosystem that surrounds it. React itself doesn't care about routing, state management, animation, or anything like that. Instead, it lets those concerns evolve naturally within the open source community. No matter what you're trying to do, there's very likely a good supporting library to help you get it done. Need a static site, you have Gatsby. Need server-side rendering, you have Next. For animation, you have Spring. For forms, you have Formic. State management, you've got Redux, Modex, Flux, Recoil, XState, and more. You have an endless supply of choices to get things done the way you like it. As an added bonus, once you have React down, you can easily jump into React Native and start building mobile apps. And it's no surprise that knowing this little UI library is one of the most in-demand skills for front-end developers today. This has been React in 100 seconds. If you want to see more short videos like this, make sure to
come back to Hack Your Future.
Fire.
So it also makes sense. All of it makes sense now, right?
Nice.
Good. All right.